Hi, I'm a fat little Asian man, and this is South Asia. On the left here, you've got this duck-shaped country, and on the right, you've got this pterodactyl-looking one. They're Pakistan and Bangladesh. And even though they live in the same neighborhood, they're different people, speak different languages, eat different food in completely different climates. But here's the thing. Today, Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing economies in the region, and its GDP per capita has somehow overtaken Pakistan's. Meanwhile, Pakistan somehow, with its advantages, remains one of the poorest countries in one of the poorest regions. And yet, just 50 years ago, they were the same country, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Which really begs the question, how do two halves of the same country with the same government, the same religion, and the same colonizers then proceed to go down two completely opposite paths? Well, the tale of the two Pakistans is one of civil wars, Cold War paranoia, nuclear weapons, clothes, and of course the classic British colonialism. It's no secret that the British colonization of India was notorious for extracting resources. But all of that begins right here in Bangladesh, aka East Bengal, when it was taken over by the East India Company in 1757. And it wasn't a coincidence that this was one of the first places the British Empire grabbed. East Bengal was possibly one of the wealthiest regions on Asia, estimated to account for 12% of the entire global GDP alone. Because it won the geography lottery, 3 massive rivers run through the region, creating the most fertile delta on the planet, which let its farmers triple their harvests for generations. But it wasn't selling food that made them rich, it was by selling drip. East Bengal was not only just a global producer of high-quality silk and cotton fabrics, the Dhaka muslin was the luxury symbol, loved by everyone from European royalty and Ottoman sultans to Chinese emperors. A region that had food to spare and dominated the global textile trade? Yeah, that was going straight to the top of the colonizer hit list. Extraction was simple. The British heavily taxed the population, then used those same taxes to buy Bengali goods, which they exported off themselves for a nice 100% profit margin. But apparently siphoning off all the wealth out of the local economy just wasn't good enough. As the Industrial Revolution took off, the British realized their domestic textiles could not compete with the quality of handcrafted Dhaka fabrics. So they just systematically wiped out the industry, weaponizing tariffs on Indian textiles while flooding the market with their own cheap, made by Oliver Twist, Lancashire cotton. And they were so successful at crushing local manufacturing that Bangladesh is still trying to revive Dhaka muslin to this day. All the bankrupt traders and weavers, by the way, had to find work harvesting jute instead, effectively turning the region into one big plantation. So while East Bengal was being turned into a cash cow, the British were getting ready to turn the northwest region into their very own meat shield. Geographically, India is protected by the Himalayas to the north and the Indian Ocean to the south, which means the only viable land route into the wealthy plains of India was through here, the Khyber Pass. It's always been a geographic double-edged sword. On one hand, the region is a mandatory checkpoint for land trade into India, becoming rich off from the trade. On the other hand, every single army that ever tried to invade India came through here at some point. So naturally, the region always had a focus on a strong military to guard its trade money. And that military power peaked with this guy, Ranjit Singh, and his Sikh Empire, which had the only centralized modern military in India at the time. For the British, who made their money from trading in ports, this powerful and mountainous region was not worth the trouble. They were happy to leave it alone. That is, until the British became terrified that the rapidly expanding Russian Empire was going to invade India through Afghanistan. And after their first attempt to control Afghanistan ended in a devastating loss, they decided they needed the entire northwest region under their control no matter what. They started with Sindh, which was conquered so brutally it even shocked the British government back home. As for the Sikh Empire, the British waited for Ranjit Singh to pass away, then used ethnic and religious divides to attack the empire directly. And in classic British fashion, they hired those exact same Sikh and Muslim soldiers to fight for them when the Indians revolted. As a reward, the British dug massive irrigation canals, diverting the Indus River system, turning millions of acres of western scrubland into fertile farmland. Except of course, the land only went to the military and loyalist elites. Meanwhile, the British were heavily taxing and shutting down the border to weaken tribes in Afghanistan and keep Russia in check, which meant the border could no longer function as a trade route. The old Silk Road economy collapsed, and what was left? An economy centered entirely around military leaders and the smaller plantations they owned, giving them the name Canal Colonies. So let's recap. On the west, a heavily militarized buffer zone run by loyalist elites. On the east, a 190-year-old deindustrialized extraction farm. Both regions had their economies completely stripped and remade to suit the British. Already the outlook is pretty bad, but what if we can make it way worse? What if we just chimera mold these two opposites into one country? When the British could no longer maintain the massive British Raj after draining their resources in World War II, they wanted out now. But their long exploitation of divides had made it impossible for the Muslim and Hindu populations to coexist. Muslim communities feared being marginalized by the Hindu majority population, and so a border was drawn, splitting British India into two countries. Except the British withdrawal was so rushed and botched in typical Brexit fashion that the border ended up being pretty terrible, with West Pakistan and East Pakistan sitting 1,000 miles apart but still one country. And honestly, the name already foreshadowed East Pakistan's fate. Pakistan is actually an acronym for the Muslim majority regions of India. Pretty cool, unless you're Bengali, which 98% of East Pakistan was. Notice how there's no B in there. Likewise, the language, the government, the military, the industry, all of it centered on West Pakistan. And it didn't take long before the West Pakistani elites basically just became the new colonizers. Most of the country's revenue came from East Pakistan's agricultural exports, but the majority of that money went straight into West Pakistan. At first, you could argue it was a necessity. Shortly after independence, war broke out with India, so the budget had to be prioritized for the military. It's just that 95% of that military happened to be in the West, so even after the war, it stayed that way for 20 years. Over half the national budget went to the military, while only around 8% went to East Pakistan. And while the East starved, the rest of the budget was spent on West Pakistani infrastructure, building a shiny new capital in Islamabad and buying industrial machinery for West Pakistani entrepreneurs. Even East Pakistan's one big advantage, its massive population, was rendered useless, because West Pakistani elites just dismantled any elected East Pakistani government. Every attempt at peaceful change in East Pakistan was then crushed with force, while the military government painted Bengalis as weak Muslims corrupted by Hindu influence. But what really put the nail in the coffin was the weather. In 1970, the Bola cyclone ripped apart East Pakistan, killing 500,000 people and destroying millions of farms. The time reporting the region looked like it had been hit by a nuclear attack. The government's response? Almost nothing. In fact, sometimes they actively stalled recovery, refusing to prioritize supply logistics and turning down foreign aid offers. And here's the thing, up until this point, East Pakistan still saw their Muslim brothers in the West as one country. Most movements in the East weren't even about independence, but about finding a way for both regions to coexist in the same system. But you know the situation is bad when aid from India and the UK arrives earlier than your own country. The only option left was to declare independence as Bangladesh. That independence would come at a horrific cost. The Pakistani government was not letting their cash cow go without a fight, and the Bangladesh Liberation War became one of the bloodiest conflicts of the century. And even though Pakistan surrendered within months against the joint Bangladeshi and Indian forces, the country was absolutely wrecked. What little infrastructure existed, bridges, roads, ports, farms, homes, destroyed. Having disasters back to back just also created one of the worst famines in history. With no way to export, no natural resources, no food, no buildings, and no political stability, the newly born Bangladesh was given the title of the second poorest country in the world. Now, while Bangladesh was struggling with its newfound independence, things weren't exactly great for Pakistan either. Because with Bangladesh gone, they were quickly realizing how screwed they were. Their biggest consumer market, their main source of raw materials, the majority of their export revenue, and over half the population, gone all at once. West Pakistani factories shut down with mass layoffs since there were no more raw materials to process and no markets to sell to. Inflation also skyrocketed as the country lost 70% of its foreign currency revenue. You see, Pakistan had actually just gone through a decade of real development under Ayub Khan, its first military dictator. He used rapid economic growth to legitimize his rule over a notoriously unstable nation. But as we know, that development came at the cost of extreme regional inequality and the systematic siphoning of East Pakistan. In fact, inequality wasn't a side effect of Ayub Khan's strategy, it was the entire strategy. The idea was simple: intentionally create a small but super wealthy class of elites who would then reinvest their wealth into the country, leading to more development. And while it did produce growth, they went way too overboard. A whistleblower revealed that just 22 families controlled 2/3 of the country's industrial and 80% of its banking assets. So with the Bangladesh region gone, This highly unequal economy dumped most of the burden onto the general population, who, by the way, were also in a state of national shock because the horrifying truth of what happened in Bangladesh was coming out, cracking the founding mythos of Pakistan as the home for all Muslims in South Asia. Amongst all the chaos, Ali Bhutto rose to power by catering to everyone who felt betrayed by the elites, which was basically everybody. His promise as the new leader was simple: redistribute the wealth. While that sounds nice and idealistic, Bhutto made a bit of an overcorrection. Bhutto blamed the country's ruin and the loss of East Pakistan on the greed of the industrial oligarchs. And his solution was to take their economic power away by nationalizing all private banks, insurance companies, and 31 major industrial clusters, all at once. The sudden extreme change scared the elites into pulling their private investments and money out of the country entirely. Meanwhile, the new state enterprises became centers of corruption and mismanagement, racking up massive amounts of debt that still exists today. And of course, because Bhutto's luck was just that bad, the capital crisis coincided perfectly with the global oil shocks, skyrocketing inflation and cratering the currency. Ironically, the poor and middle-class workers Bhutto promised to protect were the ones who took the full force of yet another economic crisis. Now, if you think nationalized industries and economic crises sound bad, newly independent Bangladesh was going through the exact same phenomenon, just 100 times worse. Remember how they started from below zero? Well, they also lost their entire industrial leadership in the war. As the Pakistani forces were defeated, the non-Bengali elites who owned the vast majority of factories, banks, and shipping lines all fled the country as well. So with literally nobody left to run the industries, the founding father of Bangladesh, Mujibur Rahman, decided to go full socialism, nationalizing roughly 85 to 90% of all industrial assets, including the crucial textile and jute mills. Yeah, like Pakistan, that went about as well as you'd expect. The government handed the reins of these massive enterprises to political loyalists with zero managerial experience. The result was immediate, catastrophic industrial collapse. Production plummeted, unemployment skyrocketed, and widespread corruption drained what little wealth there was. Oh, and don't forget the same oil shocks and a devastating famine creating over 1 million casualties on top of everything as well. All that economic chaos translated directly into political chaos. And in a single year, there were 4 coups, including the one where Mujibur himself died. And from that final coup rose this guy, Ziaur Rahman. When Ziaur took over, Bangladesh was now in an even deeper hole than before. And he knew that without a large inflow of money, there wouldn't even be a country left to rule. So his entire regime became about attracting as much foreign investment and aid as humanly possible. To attract Western donors, he swiftly abolished Mujibur's socialist policies and started denationalizing industries, unlocking massive aid and investment from the West. That money went to 2 things. First, overhauling the country's agriculture with new machinery, irrigation systems, and high-yield rice trains. Second, joint ventures with Taiwan and South Korea to train workers in modern textile manufacturing. Ziaur's policies were a success, with the economy nearly doubling in 5 years. And this was despite the fact that both Ziaur and his military rivals tried to assassinate each other constantly, with around 21 coup attempts back-to-back ending in Ziaur's assassination. But even with Ziaur gone, his formula, attract foreign investment and grow export, survived him. Meanwhile in Pakistan, they were also having a coup. So remember how badly Bhutto's fight with the industrial elites was going? Well, his fight with the military elites was going even worse. You see, Bhutto's whole government was built on working class support for weakening the military elites. The problem is, weakening your own military when India is right across the border is a great way to get absolutely annihilated. So Bhutto's solution was nuclear weapons. In his mind, it was perfect. He could keep weakening the military while holding a weapon that would deter India, who, by the way, was also developing nukes. Small issue, developing nuclear weapons is stupidly expensive. Just ask the other guys. And the already devastated Pakistani economy could not handle any more debt. Bhutto's famous quote, "We will eat grass, even go hungry, but we will get one of our own," was becoming a literal reality. Actually, the perfect opportunity for the military to throw him out. Enter Pakistan's new military dictator, General Zia-ul-Haq. And yes, Pakistan's Zia and Bangladesh's Zia were in power at the same time. Both military dictators, different guys, similar name. Now, Zia-ul-Haq's era produced Pakistan's largest economic boom ever. And it's also what cemented Pakistan as one of the poorest states today. When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, Pakistan suddenly became the most important frontline of the entire Cold War, and Zia-ul-Haq knew it. He used that position for billions in foreign aid from the US and the Gulf states, creating an economic high for Pakistan. This also happened to coincide with the oil boom of the 80s, when millions of Pakistani blue-collar workers were shipped off to Saudi Arabia and the UAE to build their megacities, sending their wages back home and creating a second wave of foreign cash. But here's the issue. The economy was growing only because of external factors. The national budget exploded, but it mostly went to the military and the nuclear program, keeping internal productivity low. And being rich with foreign cash meant nobody bothered building a real tax system, with most of the elites exempt from income taxes altogether. On top of that, Zia-ul-Haq's legitimacy didn't come from development, but from restoring Islam back to Pakistan. So instead of reforming the economy, he inserted conservative Islam parties into the center of education, the social system, and the law. But probably the most damning thing was his parting gift. When pressured into holding elections, Zia-ul-Haq amended the constitution so that the military-backed president could basically do whatever it wanted to the elected civilian prime minister. Military dominance guaranteed in the constitution forever. So when the oil boom ended and the Soviet-Afghan war wrapped up, Pakistan's aid vanished overnight. And what was left? A budget with no internal income to sustain sky-high military spending. Politics permanently hijacked by the military, and a generation educated on religion more than skills, staffing outdated industries. All this basically set up Pakistan's never-ending cycle of debt and future of scrambling for any source of foreign money. While Pakistan's richer periods actually make it poorer today, ironically, Bangladesh's economic miracle happened precisely because they were poor. Unlike Pakistan, who got billions from the US for basically just being in the right place, Bangladesh had to get its foreign money the hard way, as in IMF bailouts. You see, by the late 70s, the global jute market, the country's largest export, took a large hit as synthetic materials like nylon took over. Bangladesh needed a replacement export industry right now, and that industry was once again selling drip. Selling clothes was always kind of the classic get-rich-quick scheme for Asian countries in the 60s. But by now, Western economies had started strictly limiting textile imports from Asia to protect their own markets. Except, Bangladesh was so poor, officially categorized as a least developed country, that these quotas didn't apply to them in Western markets. Being dirt poor had become a competitive advantage. Add in a massive rural population providing endless cheap labor, and Bangladesh was the perfect partner for a South Korean chaebol. They trained workers, set up factories, and used the country as a quota-free backdoor into Western markets. Also, the workers they trained left and started their own factories, multiplying the industry within the country. Factories began hiring rural women who had previously stayed at home, doubling the workforce. This especially contrasted with Pakistani law increasingly pushing women out of public life. Now, the government was still way too chaotic and broke to provide services for this new workforce, and was open to all the help that it could get. Massive NGOs stepped in, handing out microloans, building schools, and educating the new rural workforce. And as this richer, more educated workforce started investing their income back into health and education, it created a boom of productive young workers driving the economy even further. The result was a quiet economic miracle. Production, GDP per capita, exports, life expectancy, all up exponentially. And what's generally impressive is that all this happened despite the politics. The decade-long military dictatorship under Ershad was known for being super corrupt. After he was kicked out by two women, they both spent the next 20 years trying to destroy each other, ending in another 15-year-long dictatorship. At a glance, both countries feel similar. Both depend heavily on external money, both have unstable politics and feuding leaders. Both struggle with insane levels of corruption and high inequality. But at their core, they are fundamentally different. From colonization onwards, Pakistan was built as a militarized garrison state that runs on extraction. First from its canal colonies, then from East Pakistan, then from Cold War sponsors. And every time the outside money dries up, the military and industrial elites just go back to extracting from the state itself and dodging taxes, instead of building actual competitive industries. The military still controls most of the government and the economy, running everything from banks to bakeries. And instead of chasing US military aid, Pakistan has simply switched sponsors, now courting development funds from China and the Gulf states, new donors but the still same cycle. Bangladesh was on the other end of the extraction. It's never had the luxury of a sponsor or a garrison to fall back on. So through every era of pain and chaos, It survived the only way it could, by squeezing everything out of the few advantages it had, even its poverty. Maybe that's why even through the chaos, no Bangladesh leader ever touched the export industry, because if they did, it would mean mutually assured destruction. Of course, Bangladesh has its own ticking time bombs. The fall of Hasina has left a whole new political vacuum. The massive debt racked up under her regime is looming, and external shocks like the US-Iran conflict have also hit the country pretty hard. So now we'll have to wait whether this new era of Bangladesh can finally fix the problems that have gone untouched for so long, or whether they will go back to looking like the Pakistan they once were. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I make these videos by myself and I don't use AI, which you can probably tell from how my video looks and sounds different from AI channels. So it would be a big help if you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Here's some other content you may like.